related to credit. Okay, so if you have an accountant, obviously that would make sense. You want to make sure that, you know. Even like someone asked, well, what about human resources? Absolutely, because they have access to personal information. They have access to financial information of all their employees, like with direct deposits. Payroll would be another example of that. Another big one, Assembly Bill 469, which is the Wage Theft Prevention Act. This is one of several employment laws that were recently signed by Governor Jerry Brown. It takes effect, and it did take effect on January 1st. And this has been modified on a number of current laws and created several new code provisions. How many of you have heard of this? And how many of you have your new forms that you're giving to all your employees? Only a couple of you. Hey. So let's talk about this. The Wage Theft Prevention Act what it did was it revised Labor Code 98 and permits Labor Code to hold an administrative hearing to recover liquidated damages when employers don't pay the minimum wage. They added a new section to Labor Code 200.5, which extends the statute, this is a big one, extends the statute of limitations under the DLSE, currently 1 year. The statute of limitations will now be 3 years from the date an assessed penalty is final. And revises Section 226, which requires farm labor contractors to list the name, address, and legal entity that secured the services of the employer, and requires employers to retain a copy of the wage statement and record deductions taken for 3 years. Okay? It revised Labor Code Section 240, which may require certain employers to post a bond in order to coerce employers to follow the law and to ensure that there's a source of funds to pay the awards. And even though the employer may appeal, if the employer does not appeal and fails to post bond, the employer may be subject to a civil penalty of up to $10,000. Okay? It also revised Section 243. When an employer has been twice convicted of a wage violation or failed to satisfy a judgment for the non-payment of wages within a 10-year period, it permits the court to prohibit the employer from conducting business unless they post that bond to pay the wages.
On the first labor code, it said required to go back there to
this one, the revision.
May require certain employers. May require when? Right away or only if they get in trouble?
Usually when if they get in trouble with failure to pay wages. Okay. Also, the Labor Code Section 1174 was revised to say that employers will now be required to retain employee payroll records for a minimum of 3 years rather than 2, which was interesting to us because we always said 4 years. We always said 4 years, and they're saying now, I guess they have clarified this issue, that it should be 3 years. I say keep it as long as you have the employee, because you know, you never know. So my recommendation is keep it if you can, as long as that employee is still with you. Okay, but the minimum required is 3 years. In addition, employers, I say you cannot prohibit an employee from maintaining a personal record of their hours worked for piece rate units earned. So, and that also includes any kind of photographs. A lot of times people are using their cell phones to photograph their time cards and their time sheets because they want to keep track. You cannot prohibit that. Yes?
So if I have an employee, well, he's no longer an employee, and he has filed a workers' comp claim after the fact, but I've been subpoenaed for his records, then technically, do I have only to provide the 3 years?
Yes.
For?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Yes. Okay. They revised 2810.5. This is actually a new section, which requires an employer at the time of hire to provide all non-exempt employees. This is the big one. This is the one you want to pay attention to. With a written notice containing specific wage and contact information. The Department of Labor Standards Enforcement has prepared a template. We have that template included in our handouts. This is something that you are required to give to all non-exempt employees.
At the time of hire.
At the time of hire, or if there is a change in their wages. Okay? So, You can also go online at this website provided here. We have the handout. This wage notice should include the job rate or rates of pay, including rates for overtime, any allowances that are claimed as part of the minimum wage, such as uniforms or meals and lodging, the employer's regular payday, the employer's name, including and doing business as, DBA's names. If you don't have that handout, raise your hand. And Scott, do you have any extras? There's a few people down here that don't have that handout. Raise your hand, please, if you don't have that handout.
It's called Notice to Employees, Labor Section 8105. It should be in there, but I'll back up a little bit.
Address the employer's main office or principal place of business and mailing address, if that is different. Should include the employer's telephone number and the name, address, and phone number of the employer's workers' compensation insurance carrier. Yes, sir.
What if you have people on piecework?
There's even piecework, if they're still considered a non-exempt employee, you need to provide them with this statement upon hire, or if you're changing any of the wage information for that employee, you have a requirement to provide that new statement to the employee.
So if you say ours happen to be a percentage, if you put in this form the percentage you're paying for the piecework, that's because you don't know the hourly wage.
Right, you would have to put the average, or what you think the average is, but you would have to include that information. So, if it's piecework, it's however many, per item. Are you a mechanic?
No, with manufactured.
Okay. Okay, we can talk about that. Yes.
I heard exactly what you said, and I just want to make sure I understand it. So if we give like annual merit increases
For your non-exempt employees? Yes.
you would give them that.
Yes, you would have to give them that notification. Yes.
What happens if you misclassify an employee and you didn't hand it out?
If you misclassify an employee and you didn't hand it out, you would be penalized. There would be a penalty.
But if you hired somebody as a exempt employee, they turned out to be hourly and you didn't hand this out to them, is there a penalty on top of that too? I don't. I mean, it's just something I just thought about. It could. I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't come back. They're looking for anything.
There's a penalty assessed for failing to provide. I don't know off the top of my head what that penalty is. Yes.
Do you recommend giving this to current employees as well?
No, you do not have to give it to your current employees. Only anyone that you are hiring, or whoever you hired on January 1st forward, you would give this wage notice to. Or if there's any changes to an existing employee's wages. So when they get a raise. Yes.
You give them a raise?
If you give them a raise, then you would change the wage information. If everything else is the same, the big one here is usually workers' compensation, because that changes all the time. That can change every year. So,
What about medical insurance?
then it's a require the medical insurance information. Only wages, regular overtime, and your workers' compensation, and the name of the business or a DBA. So if you're somehow there's a change in that, you would have to provide notification to the
Every time
employee
workman's
and
comp
separation.
changes? Like every time I renew workman's comp, if I change my carrier, I have to hand it
You have
out?
to notice, you have to give a notice to your employees of that change, yes.
So we did, let's say we have 700 employees and we did 100 reviews at the beginning of January, then we have to do this wage statement too?
Yes, you would have to give them a copy of it, yes, and have them sign. The only people that are excluded from this are public employees, exempt employees, employees covered under a collective bargaining agreement, okay? If the change